This is the Rhondda, two valleys with but a single name. One big and one small, the Rhondda Fawr and the Rhondda Fach. We're very proud of them here, proud of their beauty, proud of their history, and especially proud of their people. Like people everywhere, we come and go, but if you're born in the Rhondda, you never leave it for good. You always return. Actor, writer, boxer, it doesn't matter what you are or how famous you become, you'll always come back. Because there's no other place quite like this. Nowhere so good on God's earth. I was born here. My name is Donald Houston. I'm an actor. A childhood spent here is a wonderland Alice never dreamed of. The peaks, the slopes, noises, colors, even the smells. What makes this valley? The tang in the air, the homeliness of old hills, relics from the sylvan days of farms, squirrels, brooks, sheep tracks before the furious shafts made the valley a black Klondike, known the whole world over. Yes, all that. And more. So much more. There are shafts deeper than the pits, seams richer than the coal, the wealth in the hearts of the people. Their courageous hands tell a story as clearly as old parchments, hands hardened by toil, hallowed by prayer. Here courage has always been as lofty as the tips and as commonplace as a lump of coal, and sacrifice too, chiseled on the faces. I've seen it in the threadbare scarf, the loose denture, the polished hobnail, and the honest smile. Seen it in the matless kitchen, the empty parlor, the whitewashed pantry, and the finger without a ring. Here amongst these great slabs of glory, magnificence upon magnificence, where the stubborn mountains tell the passing clouds just where they get off, and a pigeon has the sky all to itself. I've seen it all. There's a special quality about the Rhondda and its people, like something in the mind. Mirage? Miracle? All I know is that it's there. And whether you stay in the valley or leave, the impress of its people leaves its mark upon you. Like the accent, you never really get rid of it. It's a quality that inspires. It's inspired a lot of my friends and colleagues, like one I can think of now, born in this valley, Stanley Baker. Every boy has a dream of courage, but very few wake up to find it. In his youth, Stanley saw courage all around him, grew up to admire it, and it was this love of courage that led him to make a film about the heroic defense of Rorke's Drift by a handful of soldiers, many of them Welsh, against the Zulus in 1879.
From Africa to Wales, from the outpost at Rorke's Drift to a disused pit in the Rhondda Fach. Ferndale number 1, they call it. I used to play here as a boy. This place, too, has seen all hell let loose, more than once. 178 men were killed here in an explosion in 1867, and another 53 met their doom 2 years later. The shadows of those deaths hovered over this valley for a long time. My own father worked down here, until one day he, too, was brought up. Mine is a leg. This is a bad place. part of my idea of hell. I struggled hard to keep out of this pit when I left school. For me, there were two ways of doing it, through boxing or through acting. It turned out to be acting. I liked it. I liked acting, especially tough, heroic roles. The men who went down here were mostly tough men, men who lived dangerously. And many of them were heroes, made of the same stuff as those who defended Rorke's Drift. But the toughest of all, the men I most admired were the Valley's boxers, the boys who cuffed their way out to fame and fortune. So I took up boxing seriously for a time. There was no lack of champions in those days. Jimmy Wilde of Tyleston was before my time, but I knew all about him. Flyweight champion of the world, 864 fights, lost only 4. The mighty atom, they called him. The ghost with a hammer in his hand. The Judges' Hall, where the big fights were staged. The place is a little different now. Yes, dancing and bingo are the big attractions nowadays. The stage has ousted the ring.
49, 6 and 2, 62.
And the same thing happened in my own career. The passion to act overcame the passion to mix it. But they still have the stars on the ceiling. And many a good man saw them, lying on his back right there after Tommy Farr had hit him for 6. Tommy Farr was the last of the legends, the men in the world class. And I remember the night in 1937 when he fought Joe Louis for the world title. Tommy's hometown of Tonopandi was tuned into America. Every ear was glued to the set. Women chewed their apron strings, deacons clenched their fists, and a whole nation of children refused to go to bed as Tommy squared up to the brown bomber.
Yankee Stadium, New York. And Tommy Farr, the 23-year-old Welshman, battles it out with Joe Louis, the new heavyweight champion of the world who took the title from Cinderella Man James Braddock in Chicago earlier this year. Farr, in the striped shorts on the left, is so confident of victory that the odds against him winning have dropped from 7-1 to 3-1. Grim-faced with his chin tucked well in, the Welshman keeps Louis on the move and stops him using that murderous left. Louis specializes in haymakers, and he's already KO'd more than 30 men in his professional career, but Farr's a game fighter. He attacks again and again. He's a showman, too, and gets a big hand from this 40,000 crowd.
In a way, it was our fight as well as his. Our fight out of hunger and unemployment, misery and depression, to the high plateaus of prosperity and success. Now, Tommy didn't quite make it against Louis, though a lot of people thought he did. Anyway, he put up a damn good show.
You know, I get a cracking pain in my nose every time I even look at that fight. So many people have asked me what makes a boxer. I'm sure a lot of you will know that in my instance, it was an escape from the strife and tribulations of poverty. I shall be ever grateful to boxing because boxing, it served me very, very, very well. I had a choice, of course. I had the coal mines or boxing, and I chose, as I humbly think, the lesser of the two evils. You know, I thoroughly enjoyed my boxing, but I don't know what I enjoyed the most after my fights, whether it was the money, the check that I was going to pick up next morning, or the wonderful singing that I used to have from my Welsh followers that used to come to my fights in droves. Anyway, we haven't got many fighters in the Rhondda today, but really, thank God, we've got some wonderful singers.
The Rhondda was peaceful once, a valley of rich green meadows fed by the river whose sound was never lost to the traveler's ear. A remote and quiet spot, protected from the world outside by the wild romantic mountains encircling it on all sides. But the valley's real riches lay below the surface, and nothing could protect its innocence once that black treasure had been uncovered and seen by an avid world. From 1809, when Walter Coffin sank his first pit at Dinas in Lower Rhondda, the valley was open to the prospector and the speculator. But progress was slow until the 1860s, when the deepest and richest coal seams were tapped. Then, as the world's need of coal increased and ships changed from sail to steam, as the railways penetrated to every corner of the land and the modern industrial complex mushroomed and boomed, more and more shafts were sunk, and wave after wave of new people from all parts of Wales and the West Country poured into the Rhondda to work. In the last half of the century, the present Rhondda took shape, and the now familiar landmarks made their appearance. These were the community's formative years, when the chapels were founded and the great choirs were born. Life was hard, and the size of the wage packet depended on the price the owner had for his coal. Price and wage packet remained suspiciously low. Disaffection culminated in the great Cambrian colliery strike of 1910. One of the strike leaders, Will Mainwaring, recalls the desperate and riotous mood of those times.
Because when I arrived in Mid-Rhondda, more particularly in Clydachvale at the Cambrian, it was at a most momentous date in the history of trade unionism in Britain. Because we are then face to face with a struggle imminent, long foreseen by some of my fellows at that time, and we began the task of preparing for a struggle that appeared to be inevitable amongst us, the test of strength and of determination against the Coal Owners Association of South Wales and Monmouthshire.
Through all the long, dark night of years, the people's cry ascendeth, and earth is wet with blood and tears, but our meek sufferance endeth. The few shall not forever sway, the many toil in sorrow. The powers of hell are strong today. Our kingdom comes tomorrow.
I was one of the policemen drafted to Tonopandi just before the start of the riots. I shall never forget the third night's trouble. The strikers broke and tore down the long wooden fence protecting the Scotch collieries. With it, they barricaded the main thoroughfare leading to Tonopandi Square, so isolating us police at the colliery from help. Hundreds of strikers were massed on the bank opposite the entrance to this colliery. the bank was full of stones, with which they bombarded us incessantly for well over 2 hours. It was on this night that they smashed up and looted all the shops on Tonopandi Square. It was then that they decided to appeal to the Home Office and War Office for help. The Home Secretary was then Sir Winston Churchill. Some days later, 200 cavalry troops arrived at Pontypridd under the command of General Vivian Macready. Prior to the arrival of these troops, there was a terrific battle with the strikers and us police, in which Police Inspector Rendell of the Bristol City Police was killed. I was quite close to him when he was struck on the back of the head with a stone. It was another night that all the forces of hell were let loose. It was on the night of the 28th of November 1910, the last battle with the strikers took place. That night proved to be the climax to the whole strike, at least as far as I was concerned. I am still suffering to this day from the injuries I received that night, as I received a lump of coal in the eye, a stone in the mouth knocking out 5 teeth, and a china bedchamber which smashed through my helmet and split open my scalp. That was coup de grace for me, and I fell unconscious.
The strike lasted for 11 months. There was much poverty and suffering, and in the end, the miners had to accept defeat. The Cambrian strike should have been the strike to end all strikes, but it wasn't. The struggle went on, and once again the troops were called out to defend the coal owners' property. In the 20s, the demand for coal reached its peak and slowly began to decline. Men were thrown out of work. The world owed these people a living, but it was not prepared to pay. Among the great turmoils of the time was the general strike of 1926, and Gwyn Thomas, the Rhondda-born novelist, has a child's memory of that tortured year.
Somewhere outside my window, a child is whistling. He is walking fast down the hill and whistling. The tune on his lips is Swanee. I go to the window and watch him. He is moving through a fan of light from a street lamp. His head is thrown back, his lips protrude strongly, and his body moves briskly. D-I-X-I, even mammy, how I love you, my dear old Swanee. The Mississippi and the Taff kiss with dark, humming lubricity under an ashen hood of years. Swanee, my dear old Swanee. The sound of it promotes a roaring life inside my ears. Whenever I hear it, brave ghosts in endless procession march again. My eyes are full of the wonder they knew in the months of that long, idle, beautifully lit summer of 1926. By the beginning of June, the hills were bulging with a clearer loveliness than they had ever known before. No smoke rose from the great chimneys to write messages on the sky that puzzled and saddened the minds of the young. The endless journeys of coal trams on the incline, loaded on the upward run, empty and terrifyingly fast on the down, ceased to rattle through the night and mark our dreams. The parade of nailed boots on the pavements at dawn fell silent. Day after glorious day came up over the hills that had been restored by a quirk of social conflict to the calm they lost 100 years before. When the school holidays came, we took to the mountain tops, joining the liberated pit ponies among the ferns on the broad plateau. That was the picture for us who were young. But for our fathers and mothers, there was the enclosing fence of hinted fears, fear of hunger, fear of defeat. And then, out of the quietness and the golden light, partly to ease their fret, a new excitement was born, the carnivals and the jazz bands.
Time, the great healer, has faded away the dark years of the Depression and brought prosperity to the Rhondda once more. Grass grows on the once starkly black coal tips, and the sylvan days are returning. There is a new sense of freedom in the air, freedom from the shackles of the bitter past, and there is a new light eliminating the shadows of the long, dark night of years.
Well, we've heard something about the tears of the valley, but the laughter of the valley, I think, is much more interesting because it's very understandable against the background of the fact that this place was assembled as a series of vast immigrations. Here was an empty, silent valley, and then you had a loud, noisy valley. And something that I would never have dreamed I would be able to say, the poverty bit was so marvelous. Because really, poverty, deprivation, anguish, misery actually create the total human being in exactly the same way that the anguish of a mother creates a child in herself. I will probably retract this statement later on, but still, I think it's substantially true. When I ponder the jokes that we had in the valley as parts of our mythology, the family, you know, that held a lottery to decide which of the 6 brothers would have the middle cutlet of the sardine. And of course, there is the wonderful story of the man who went in to see the remains of a friend of his. Dad, and when you're Welsh dad, you are truly dead, because we make no mistake at all about this. And he went in to see the body of his friend, and he looked at it very carefully. And he said to the widow, "Where? He looks lovely. He looks beautiful, doesn't he? He's a treat, isn't he?" The widow said, "Yes, indeed. That last week in Llandudno did him the world of good." And of course, this is it, I think. This is the entire Welsh myth, you know. There is no life, really. There's no death either. There is a simple act of mind, a simple act of sympathy, occurring beneath the sun, beneath the moon. It doesn't really matter. Simply this act of love between people.
Yes, people here need the antidote of laughter more than most, and a rich seam of humor runs just below the surface of valley life. Its most obvious outcrop is in the pubs, whose walls resound to the mirth of the customers as accounts of simple day-to-day incidents wax into grand sagas of comedy in the telling. The pubs themselves have come in for a fair ration of comment.
Publicly, malt in the valleys has had a pretty hunted time of it. I suppose that this might be one way of assuaging the temperance workers who do not want to see Satan in too gay a suit of paint, but it can set off a doleful train of thought in a visitor. And some of the hotels, monstrously large from the outside as if they had been meant to pack the whole of humanity in for one last defiant spree. They have frontages so somber, one fancies that the only drink purveyed is hemlock, the only snack, salted foxgloves, and the names of the barmaids, Bella and Donna.
Pub life today isn't what it used to be, you know. In the old days, there was a bit of dignity in it. Chaps with the gold chains standing on the door, the landlord, he was somebody. But today it seems, well, we get a lot of fun out of it, but we are reduced to more or less boozers, labourers now.
If you live in a valley, everything is up or down. There's no horizontal anywhere. Up means upstream towards the end of the valley with Mardi and the mountains, or it means up the side of the valley towards Llanwano and the rain. Whichever way you go, as Gwyn Thomas once said, you develop the leg muscles of a yak.
The particular hillside street on which I spent my first 25 years had so fierce a gradient, I was as bent as a hoop in early adolescence, and from the age of 13 to 15, I was rolled to school.
We know with what life, in an age less catered for than our own, the chapels could bulge, the hosannas of joy and promise that ran through the great gamambas. But looked at now, squat, stolid, and somehow lonely, they seem to reflect a view of life so sad, it is a miracle that our people have survived with so genial a temperament.
Being a minister in the Rhondda these days is hard going. But believe me, I think that the churches are quite alive to their responsibility and to their calling. It is true that things are not as they were. Perhaps the volcano at the moment is dormant, but there is a possibility for that volcano to erupt at any moment.
Wop, bop, looma, balam, bam, boom, to the root, oh, root, to the fruit, 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 oh, root, yeah. Wop, bop, looma, balam, bam, boom, got a girl, she live with you, she knows that's what to do. I got a girl, live with you, she knows that's what to do. She knows I love me, and indeed, but I don't know what she do to me. To the fruit, oh Rudy, to the fruity, oh Rudy, to the fruity, oh Rudy, yeah. A wop, bop, a looma, ba lam, bam, boom, I got a girl, let me see them. She almost drive me crazy. I got a girl, she let me meet her. She almost drive me crazy. She knows I love me.
Right, boys. Now, for a change, let's have some real Welsh singing. Let's sing Sanctus.
On
The old sound of Sanctus, Nedaros, the Pilgrim's Chorus, and other favorites still holds its own against rock and roll, the Mersey beat, and all the other newfangled noises of the age. Mind you, we're not intolerant of innovation. We welcome novelty. But some novelties wear well, while others wear themselves out. Well, that's our experience anyway. Good food, for instance, is a novelty our fathers only dreamed of. My bet is it's here to stay. Nowadays, you can live a truly lush life in the Rhondda and eat as well in Porth as you can in Paris. The soup in the kitchens these days is either shark fin or real turtle, to be followed by choice scampi and tartar sauce. The sulks and mists and drizzles of past skies have never been able to cancel the enchantments between the hills, any more than days of depression and fag ends and dole queues and nothing were able to stifle the fun along the slopes and streets and terraces, or drown the gazooka, blasting the angry summer and the high, heedless birds in the sky. The gazookas. Even when choirs mavanwied away in the minor key, the gazookas never failed to be jubilant. Even when reduced to a broken comb and a bit of paper. The notes were coarse, vulgar, perhaps even, but they were loud and gay and defiant and compelling enough to make Di Jones, for all his kids and worries, into a striding matador, and Gwenny next door into a Carmen whose beauty was blazing real, even if the rose was a fake. The greatness and the glory and the fun of this period are all in that lovely story by Gwyn Thomas, Gazooka. A band is formed, they compete in the next valley, they lose. And then, after the carnival's end, they all return home over the mountain path because the roads would be too hard after the disappointments of the day.
We were like an army that had nothing left to cheer about or cry about, not sure if it was advancing or retreating, and not caring. We had lost. As we watched the weird disguises, the strange yet utterly familiar faces of Britannias, matadors, and Africans shuffle past, we knew that the bubble of frivolity, blown with such pathetic care, had burst forever, and that new and colder winds of danger would come from all the world's corners to find us on the morrow. But for that moment we were touched by the moon and the magic of longing. We sensed some friendliness and forgiveness in the loved and loving earth we walked on. For minutes the silence must have gone on, just the sound of many feet swishing through the summer grass. Then somebody started playing a gazooka. The tune he played was one of those sweet, deep things that form as simply as dew upon a mood like ours. It must have been, all through the night, scored for a million talking tears and a basic disbelief in the dawn. It had all the golden softness of an age-long hunger to be at rest. The player, distant from us now, at the head of the long and formless procession, played it very quietly, as if he were thinking rather than playing. Thinking about the night, conflict, beauty, the intricate labor of living and the dark little dish of thinking self in which they were all compounded. Then the others joined in, and the children began to sing.
Yes, that's the Rhondda, all right. That's the spirit of its people. Passionate for all causes, courageous in all circumstances, insistent on their rights and generous to a fault. Never at a loss for words, and always ready to sing.